So I will call to order the meeting of the Metro Council Special Committee established pursuant to resolution number RS 2018-1039. I initially want to thank each of you for being willing to serve on a unprecedented committee and your commitment to undertaking this work in a serious, impartial manner. Without objection, I'm going to make a couple of opening remarks, and then I will preside over the meeting while you elect your chair. I think that's what the charter provision calls for. So in the letter I sent you all earlier this week, was that this week or last week? This week, whenever I sent you the letter, I outlined what the resolution said in terms of the scope and tried to offer some friendly suggestions in terms of how to read that and perhaps how you might best conduct yourselves while you do this. Obviously, I don't have the ability to order you to do anything, but I hope you'll follow my advice to the extent you feel is advisable. The second thing I want to do is give you an update on what the audit committee did on Tuesday. As you know, by charter, we have an independent auditor that is responsible for looking periodically at each and every department to look both at their financial and their performance in a comprehensive way. Prior to Tuesday's meeting, the auditor, Mr. Mark Swan, who's here with us today, had received 2 requests to undertake an audit of the issues that are also outlined in the resolution. Not with the same precise language, but essentially looking at the same conduct. Or alleged conduct, and I suppose in some cases admitted conduct. The audit committee, on which I sit along with Councilman Mendez, Councilman Cooper, the finance director, and 2 private citizens appointed by their respective organizations, voted to direct the auditor to work with the council special committee to make sure that his investigation pursuant to his authority as auditor was coextensive, meaning the same as the investigation that this committee determines is what they want to see done. A couple of reasons that, and Councilman Mendez will have a chance to correct me if I'm wrong, but a couple of reasons were that it would prevent duplication in terms of the government asking the same question twice. It could be accomplished within the existing budget of the city. So at least hopefully there is some money available in the auditor's budget to seek outside advice if necessary. But hopefully we can do it within the existing resources of the auditor's function. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that so that as you begin your deliberations about taking next steps, you incorporate that into your thinking. Mr. Swan is here today, and he can answer, I'm sure, any questions that come up about what he can and can't do and what he is willing to do in coordination with this committee. So that's really all I have to say. I intend to hang around for the meeting to answer questions if needed, but at this point, it's up to the committee to elect a chair. So are there any nominations? Councilor Haywood.
I rise to nominate Bob Mendez at-large councilman.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Are there any other nominations? Let's see, Councilman Swope.
Yes, at this time, I'd like to nominate Berkeley Allen to chair this committee.
All right. All right. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I'm just going to, let's see, Alan Mendez. All of those, I'm going to do it alphabetically. All of those in favor of Council Lady Allen, please raise your hands. And in favor of Mr. Mendez? Council Lady Allen, congratulations. I'm going to step down. If you'll bring your name tag or your little thingy, you can slide it in when you come up here.
Thank you for this honor. I pledge to do this very difficult job with objectivity and dignity, and I hope that y'all will join me in that goal. I'm looking at the agenda, which I appreciate having in front of me. The first item of business listed on the agenda, well, third now, is engaging services of an outside professional. And at this point, I would like to ask Mr. Jameson, perhaps, if you can give us some guidance on that. I'll turn on your mic.
The Metro Charter provides that special counsel can be employed by the Vice Mayor upon passage of a resolution by the council. The special counsel could be paid compensation as the council deems appropriate by resolution, and that resolution and the selection does not require the approval of the mayor, finance director, or law director. That is in section 8.607 of the Metro Charter. Questions had been raised to me individually regarding the potential application of the procurement code. This is somewhat uncharted territory, but the procurement code does provide a specific exception for the employment of special counsel. In the code, it's section 408080. Also, as you may have recalled from the previous opioid litigation counsel selection, that even without that, legal counsel is generally not selected by virtue of a competitive bid, but simply upon the recognized competence and integrity of the legal counsel. With respect to retaining, as the resolution puts it as well, an outside auditor, my understanding from the Vice Mayor's comments in the Audit Committee meeting was that that would likely be suggested by this committee to be handled by our Metro auditor, but that's obviously your decision.
Thank you. So can you specify a little bit more what the auditor could do in terms of helping us with that process?
In terms of selecting legal counsel?
Yes.
Just nobody's asked for this or my advice, but if asked, my strong suggestion would be that this not be an investigation that is conducted by the committee itself. The one and only precedent we have for this was an investigation done in 1974 by a special committee. And it might help if I can give just the background of how that committee performed its duties and how that differs from today. Through, I guess, coincidence or curious timing, there were 5 council members against whom various ethical allegations had been made at essentially the same time in 1974. This was prior to the adoption of any code of ethics by this body, and therefore made all the more difficult in terms of evaluating their conduct. Their conduct was evaluated essentially with regard to the oath of office they had taken. The committee, a special committee, was created pursuant to the same charter sections as this committee was created. They voted to request at their meetings the attendance of both the district attorney and the U.S. attorney at the time. They met a total of 7 times, interviewed 22 witnesses, and reviewed 10 documents. The majority of the investigation dealt with a particular council member who was in the Donaldson district at the time. They voted to hire a court reporter to record all of their interviews of witnesses and to purchase tapes to record the interviews, all of which were public per our code. The appropriation for that at the time amounted to a total of $3,000, which was taken from the contingency account. At the conclusion of their investigation, the council member from Donaldson that was the subject of most of the investigation time, the committee recommended his resignation following an indictment that had been handed down. The committee also voted at the time, noting the absence of a standard of conduct, that the Nashville Bar Association and then Vanderbilt Law School Dean John Wade be appointed to begin work on the standards of conduct that is now in your Metro Code at 2.222. If this committee should decide to pursue outside counsel, that would frankly be my personal recommendation today. It is a substantially different time. You have resources and assets at your disposal that were not available in 1974, including not only the code, but a very competent Metro auditor. You have specific provisions within the charter and the code that allow you to retain outside counsel. The council office has done no real work in terms of determining who your outside counsel may be, other than to simply establish for you that it is a recognized specialty. There are firms across the country that specialize in internal investigations, municipal internal investigations, and the like. Some questions, again, I'm just going to keep talking until somebody tells me to shut up, but some questions that might be of importance to you is, number one, the cost of outside counsel. That would be approved, my suggestion would be on a continuing basis by resolution. It has to be approved by resolution. I imagine it would be difficult, if not impossible, for a firm to tell you right now what the total costs would be to them, and therefore for them to submit their invoices on an ongoing basis for approval. In terms of the location of the firm, again, there are firms across the country that handle this, but because I assume this body will want to pay particular attention to the expense, I would recommend someone nearby for whom we are not paying travel expenses just to get here. And if they were within Davidson County or at least Middle Tennessee, they would have access and be practitioners under the Tennessee Bar. An out-of-state licensed attorney who comes here would no doubt be practicing law, and you would probably want a Tennessee licensed practitioner. Beyond that, in terms of selecting them, our office can assist, and probably in coordination with Mr. Swan's office, in locating competent and available counsel. It is technically under the charter employed by the vice mayor with approval by the council by resolution.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendez.
Thanks. I'd like to make a recommendation to the group for discussion about how to go about thinking about counsel, outside counsel for the committee. One, just to set the table a little bit. So last week we had 30 votes, 3/4 of the body approving a resolution that the council special committee would lead the investigation. And there was talk during the debate about that resolution about having us basically manage the professionals that might look at it. Then earlier this week, there was a unanimous vote of the audit committee, who supervises the internal auditor, to have Mr. Swan work with the committee, following the lead of the committee, to determine the scope of the internal auditor's review and report findings to the internal auditor. As I think all of you know, the internal auditor doesn't work in a vacuum. Typically, there's a requesting party and a report is made to the requesting party. The concept at the audit committee a couple days ago was that this committee is becomes the requesting party, outlining the scope of what we would like from the internal auditor. So that's the background. I think, as Mr. Jameson indicated, the best practice in a situation like this is, I mean, frankly, we don't need the 7 of us on the committee as junior detectives figuring stuff out. I view us more as managing or supervising people who do this professionally. My suggestion would be, if the vice mayor would be willing, is he's somebody who understands the legal community, has practiced law here for 20 years, understands what firms are good at different things, and we could maybe keep this efficient and moving forward if we ask the vice mayor to make a recommendation to the committee about a lawyer in the next week. I'm assuming we'll meet sometime soon again. And the way I've got this thought out, at least in my head, job one is to get outside counsel so we can have, as Mr. Jameson indicated, professional advice from people who do this sort of thing for a living. And then we would, pursuant to the audit committee's request and the wishes of the council, have that outside lawyer meet with Mr. Swan. I'm sure that they would be able to come up with an agreed recommendation for the scope of services that internal audit would provide. And I believe that the outside lawyer would probably recommend some narrow things that the outside lawyer would look at, maybe in terms of policies, as opposed to things that internal audit would do. But I would suggest we get counsel first and then have that lawyer work with Mr. Swan to propose to us an agreed upon division of labor. And then we'd be in a position, the committee, of having gotten high quality internal audit, working on it, professional advice about the way this should work, and then we let them do their job. And I know that's a lot. I think that maximizes the use of the audit committee and therefore the internal auditor. It maximizes the professionalism of the investigation that we're overseeing, and does our best to keep expenses down. And I'm happy to skinny that down to a motion to ask the vice mayor, or if we want to have discussion first, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. We'll consider that a motion and formalize it as we need to. Vice Mayor, would you like to comment on that at this point or after discussion?
Well, I mean, I would say a week is short if I want to actually give people a chance to express an interest before I would anybody who was interested, I would at least have a conversation with, and probably want to sit down with people I sort of narrowed it down to. So the process I envision, if the committee wants me to, would be that I would have both the Nashville Bar Association and the Napier-Luby Bar Association send out an announcement tomorrow saying that, sort of giving notice that we're looking for a lawyer to engage in this task. Set a very quick timeline for people to contact me, and then try and find somebody who, I guess what I would be looking for is expertise, no real conflict, well, no legal or political conflict of interest. Going to be hard, that one, just because lawyers are so engaged. And then, as always, trying to make sure everybody gets a fair shot at the work. So I do my best. If it was clear that one lawyer was head and shoulders above everybody, I might come back with one. My preference probably would be not to do that, but to come back with a couple and let the committee hear from each one and then decide what to do. If either one of those, I think is likely. I'll take the direction of the council on that. If y'all want me to come back with one, I'll do that. If you'd prefer me to come back with 2 or 3 for the committee to choose, I will do that. I will say that's going to delay it, I think, a little bit, but that's, I'm asking for direction, I guess, on that.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Councilmember Gilmore.
Thank you, Chair Allen. I like Councilmember Mendez's suggestion, and also was listening intently to what the Vice Mayor had to say, and I like what he offered as well. But I just wanted to add to that we have some type of rubric of sorts. I think that would be great. I think we definitely can lean to the Vice Mayor and his expertise, because he is an attorney, has been doing that for a lot of years. And I would suggest that there would be a couple, just in terms of transparency and equity, and just maybe a way for those. So if we have a rubric and we have a way for persons that are interested, and we have that rubric, he could kind of weave those out, but a way to contact people that may be interested. I understand he said he would use the Luby Bar and the Nashville Bar, which are very reputable, but just an opportunity to make sure that it goes out and that it has been transparent, and that we do have some type of rubric of sorts, and that there are a couple of people versus one. But we don't want to overwhelm the Vice Mayor, but I just think in terms of equity and parity, those type of things are important as well.
Good suggestion. Could you see us simultaneously working on rubric as he's working on gathering who those names may be and developing those? I'm going to get to Councilmember Swope, and then I'll come back to you, Councilmember Mendez. Swope, I'm trying to look for him. Hang on. No, I'm sorry. It was Councilmember Pulley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Councilmember Mendez has charted us a really nice path to land this committee and the council on the high road on this investigation. And I firmly agree that we should be putting this in the hands of professionals and view our role as more of an oversight body than actual investigators. So I firmly agree with that. When I was listening, one of the things that I was struggling with was whether or not we should take a look and see what the auditor has for us during the course of his investigation before we go down the road of hiring a special counsel. But the more I think about it, and I'd be interested to hear what you guys think, I think in the interest of efficiency and getting on down the road of doing what we're supposed to do, I certainly support the motion to move forward with this process. I think it's very important that we get the right person to do this, and a professional who's used to doing these kind of things, and it's important that we get a high-quality firm or attorney. And I believe Councilor Jameson and the Vice Mayor have both offered their assistance in that process. So I absolutely support that motion, and I'm firmly convicted in that path. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Haywood.
Yes, I would like to affirm what Council at Large Mendez has offered. And by the same token, Council Lady Gilmore mentioned a rubric. And I would think that Vice Mayor Briley would have a rubric in place as he would weed out or accept the attorneys that would come before us. And I think that we could possibly review and use that same rubric. We may add to it, we may take from it, but I would think, having full confidence in our Vice Mayor, that we could actually use that same rubric.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Mendez.
So the idea of 1 week, I heard some sensitivity about that, so maybe when make the motion, it'll be 2 weeks. And I guess nobody has pushed back on the idea of getting a couple recommendations. So I guess when I make the motion, it'll be 2, no less than 2. And as far as the rubric, I mean, and I'm taking that to mean like qualifications we're looking for. And I think we. I mean, I would be predisposed to trust the Vice Mayor's judgment and have him tell us when he was making the recommendations what he valued. My sense is it's probably not a lot different than what he already shared, which is professional experience in this subject matter expertise, as well as no apparent political or actual conflict of interest, and a preference for local, if that's possible. And I imagine it's not much more than that.
Thank you.
Well,
Yes, sir.
I would add, one other thing. My firm prides itself on being the most diverse law firm in town. So I would be probably kicked out of the firm if I didn't include that in the rubric. So that would be a factor for me as well. I'll say that.
I think that would be appreciated. Thank you. Councilmember Swope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the motion that Mr. Mendez has made here. I think that is an actively good idea moving forward. I also believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Counselor, but we have to pass via resolution in chambers with full council any dollars spent from this committee, correct?
Correct.
We have a council meeting next Tuesday, so it would be, if we had 2 weeks from today to decide on a council, that we would present to council first reading in March, correct?
Correct.
Secondly, I don't know if this is smart or not, but in the interest of public funds and being fiscally responsible with people's money, I think our own internal auditor, Mr. Swan, is sufficient for me to review the numbers on this. So we might want to limit the scope of an attorney, an outside attorney, to just the policy, if any policy violations have been made. Also working with Mr. Swan, but I don't think we need to go outside for any other thing other than policy decisions or policy infractions potential. Is there any way, Mr. Counselor, to put a limit on that amount of money?
I think to do so on the front end would be impractical, and as mentioned previously, it would be difficult. Certainly you can, but what I think you're probably going to wind up deciding, my guess is that you would do this on an ongoing basis, make it a monthly invoice process, for example, with their submission subject to council approval by resolution of each invoice that comes through. And we can do that pursuant to the council's regularly scheduled meetings. And as long as the attorney or firm knows that going forward, I believe the vice mayor would probably make that part of the initial discussions. I think that'll work.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'll be interested to hear from Auditor Mr. Swan's point of view, because we don't want to be redundant. And also, we would like to hear from the auditor what kind of a legal expertise it will be best served to work with him, so we can limit the scope of our investigation and not redundancy, and as well as most beneficial to work with auditor in that limited scope.
Mr.
So-
Swan, can we get your comments at this point, and I'm sure we'll continue this discussion.
I appreciate it. I'm Mark Swan, the Metropolitan Auditor. We have worked out some preliminary division of labor ideas, and what we would suggest is that our office could do a lot of work on anything related to just the travel and expenses and overtime pay and those transactional activity and the metro policies and finance policies related to that. Then the area that we think would be best for assistance would be with an outside counsel would be related to taking all that information together with the standards of conduct on how that would, instead of me making an interpretation of where we fall in conflicts of interest or appearances of conflicts of interest, it would be best. And normally I would go to the Department of Law here when we have an internal investigation, when there's an issue of conflicts of interest, and get their opinion and put those facts to them. But I don't think that may be the best suggestion for this particular activity.
Thank you. Appreciate that explanation. I think we've let everyone speak who has asked, and I would say the motion has been second, third, fourth, and fifth. Councilmember Mendez.
I'm not sure whether, I want to make sure we're clear on what the motion is, but I do want to address the idea of scope. I think so I'm using my experience of having hired lawyers and being hired a whole bunch of times as a lawyer. I think if we, at the front end, without getting legal advice, issue a narrow scope, then we run the risk of having blind spots. I think the better practice would be to start with a possible broad scope, but make it really clear to the person who's being hired that, listen, we expect internal audit to be used absolutely to the fullest with no redundant activities, and you don't get paid unless a bill gets approved by the council, so make sure that if you don't go out of your lane on this, and make sure you're using internal audit to the fullest extent possible. And but if there's some place where you need to expand, or you recommend that your services be expanded, be sure to talk to us first before you do it. I think starting with the broader scope, rather than guessing where things are going to go, is the better practice. And with that, I'll try to state the motion succinctly.
And may I just throw out one thing? And I'm going to come back at some point in this meeting and read the resolution that gave us our scope. So if there is possibly some reference to the scope of this committee as defined by the resolution, that may at least make sure that we don't make it so broad that we get beyond the scope that we were charged with.
Well, agreed. And I would view that as when we pick somebody and there's an engagement letter, that's
Okay.
where the scopes would match up.
Just want to make sure we're all on that page. Okay. Restate your motion, please, sir.
So the motion would be that the committee ask the vice mayor to recommend no fewer than 2 potential outside lawyers for consideration by the committee to be hired to assist with the investigation, and that we ask the vice mayor to have those recommendations to us in time for a meeting 2 weeks from today. And that when the vice mayor can make the consideration that in addition to expertise and not having any conflicts of interest, the vice mayor consider diversity as one of the characteristics he considers.
Good. We have a few more comments. Thank you for restating that motion. Councilmember Pulley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Councilman Mendez is correct. I do believe that we'd be better off starting with a broader scope and with some direction to the attorney. I don't think they would be duplicitous, so I think Councilmember Swope definitely brings up a good point, and it is very wise to be fiscally responsible, but I think if we give them a broader scope and they'll have the direction that we have an internal auditor, I can't imagine that they would duplicate that, especially with the instructions. So to the extent that needs to be in the motion, I would support the broader scope.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments in the queue, are we ready to vote on this motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Vice Mayor, you have homework. Okay, I would say we have coordinated with the Metropolitan Auditor. At this point, there will be further coordination as this outside counsel is found. The next item I'm seeing is court reporter. It seems to me like Channel 3 is our court reporter. Can you comment on if there are any legal needs to do anything beyond what Channel 3 provides?
The court reporter itemization was in the event the committee decided to do the investigation themselves and was going to be conducting interviews of witnesses and so forth. So my suggestion, given the recommendation of the committee that's just passed, is that you can move to the next item.
Thank you. I mean, I'm guessing it may be possible that within these committee meetings, there may be people that are called to the public microphone, and that will be recorded here. So
Right.
Any discussion on court reporter? No. Okay. I see 2 people in the queue. Councilmember Swope, what do you want to speak on?
I was just going to iterate exactly what the counselor said,
Okay.
only add channels 2, 4, 5, 7,
Right.
and PT to that list.
Right. We are recorded. Thank you. Councilmember Gilmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to just make sure, too, that I understand, because after hearing that last comment, so we're saying that everything will be held in the chambers? Because I was not understanding it as that if we were, in fact, hiring an attorney. So if someone could just speak to that portion.
So one of the strong advantages of hiring an outside attorney will be the ability of that attorney to conduct interviews with witnesses in a bit more discreet setting. So This committee is a public body. Every meeting that is convened of this committee is public. And had the committee decided to conduct its own investigation, there would be, frankly, some squeamish scenarios where you would be placing witnesses under oath and asking them questions under the penalty of perjury with a court reporter transcribing every word stated. With the retention of an outside counsel, again, subject to your deliberations later, but the outside counsel, through arrangements with witnesses, can conduct more discreet interviews, report back to this counsel, have those interviews be conducted under oath, but in a less circus-like atmosphere, to be blunt, and a bit more efficient. But again, that is within the discretion of the committee. The committee has essentially subpoena power to compel witnesses to come before it. And essentially, any arrangements could be made through an outside attorney to have witnesses voluntarily appear, and if they don't voluntarily appear, then the alternative is to be subpoenaed by the committee. And in those instances, I think you would probably expect a great deal of cooperation with witnesses.
But that would typically happen here in chambers during regularly scheduled meetings of this committee, is that correct?
That is correct, or at some public location, and noticed and advertised appropriately. But it gives you greater options. I think it allows for greater efficiency and a bit more expedience with respect to getting to the bottom of things in a more professional manner.
Thank you. Other questions? Let's see. Councilmember Mendez, you want to speak again?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I've got a little bit different take on that last issue than Mr. Jameson. That I think is a little premature, but since it came up, I want to mention it. I think we should be clear that the idea of interviewing witnesses is premature at this time, and to me, the idea of an outside counsel being able to conduct interviews privately. The benefit isn't to be discreet or avoid squeamishness or avoid the circus. It's that it's premature. The way I imagine the process is there's a bunch of work that the internal auditor will need to do. There's going to be some work, as Mr. Swan described, for an outside lawyer to do in synthesizing information and reporting the information. And when we get there, there's going to be one of two scenarios. The facts demonstrated by that review of documents and synthesizing of information is going to be very clear one way or the other, that we declare our work done. Or there's going to be a conclusion that says, well, it might indicate this or it might indicate that. We'd have to talk to the people to figure that out. And at that point, I don't know whether that's a month or 2 months. I don't know how long in the future that is. At that point, if appropriate, then I think we'd have to consider whether we would want outside counsel or Mr. Swan to conduct interviews. And I think the best practice would be to get the best information would be to start with, I'm predicting the lawyer would suggest one-on-one interviews that gets reported to us in a public setting, so we would have the information. And if in this hypothetical future where the first phase is done and witness interviews are needed and a witness decides they don't want to do a private interview, then I think our reaction likely will be, well, if you don't want to have the private interview voluntarily, we can have a subpoena power and, come visit us in that chair right there. And so that's a long-winded way of saying I think my focus wouldn't necessarily be to make it be discreet, AKA out of the public eye. It's that it's premature, and we'll get to a decision at some point a month or two down the road about whether interviews are necessary or whether the information from the internal auditor and from the lawyer we hire gives us our firm conclusion without doing that. And we just don't know. Part of the, keeping an open mind is we sort of have to see where it leads us.
Correct. And I would say the framework that we've set up allows us many options in terms of how we pursue that, which is what we need. Seeing no one else in the queue, we have talked about, Councilmember Swope just appeared. Yes, Mr. Swope?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This might be an unrelated question, but I don't think so. And Mr. Swan, I'm going to ask you to come back up to the microphone for just a second. And I'm not going to hold you to this question, or I'm not going to hold you to the answer to this question, but what is your initial time frame on the work that you've been tasked to do?
Well, I haven't been tasked with anything today, as of today, except to offer my services to the committee.
So if you were to take a deep dive into all the hard numbers, basically on travel, on overtime, on everything involved in this particular issue, off the top of your head, are you looking at weeks or are you looking at months?
I'm thinking just, well, I hate to 4 to 6 weeks. The longest part is going to be looking at the overtime and overtime policies, because we have not looked at police overtime. So we've done fire department and other public safety overtime, but we have not done the police department. So we have to come up to speed on what their policy, their scheduling, and those kind of things.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I asked that question for the sole reason that we're scheduling another meeting and we're looking at council resolutions that have to pass in order for us to hire a special counsel. And as a consequence, I wanted to know what the internal auditor's time frame was, given their work.
Yeah, I think that's an important question. So we do need to talk about when that next meeting would happen. I believe perhaps, for sure, we need to meet in 2 weeks. Theoretically, the vice mayor would be ready. I don't know that there's anything useful we could do in 1 week other than perhaps think about rubrics, and we've talked about that. So we have tentatively thrown out 2 Thursdays from now. That is March 1st. I'm not seeing anybody jump up and down and say that's terrible. So let's tentatively set it for March 1st. We will confirm that and notice it as appropriate. I would like to take a moment of personal privilege and read through section 1 of the resolution, just as a reminder of what we've said we are setting about to do. The vice mayor has appointed a special committee consisting of 3 to 7 members, which he has done, to investigate the circumstances involving the travel and other expenses, including overtime expenses potentially related to the mayor's extramarital affair, to determine if there was any improper use of public money. The special committee shall promptly meet to elect a chair and establish rules, which is what we're doing today. So just, I mean, that's going to be our mantra for every meeting, and I think we probably do well to just sort of run through that every time to remember that's what we're doing and nothing else. Rosie? 4 o'clock, that time seems to be good. So right now we're saying March 1, Thursday at 4 o'clock in council chambers. Is there any other business? Council member?
Motion to adjourn.
I believe Erica Gilmore was reaching for her button before you started to talk. Councilmember Gilmore.
I was just going to say 4:30.
4:30? Mm-hmm. Does 4:30 work for people? I don't see any heads saying no. Okay, 4:30.
Thank you.
All right, March 1, 4:30, council chambers. All right, there was a motion to adjourn. Then seconded, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We are adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.